Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Singapore Injustice Podcast. I'm one of the co-hosts, Kush, and this is Max, and today we're going to be taking a brief look into some of the injustices in Singapore for this series.
Welcome to another episode of the Singapore Injustice Podcast. Today I will be hosting this one on my own. It was me, Max Dornbos, one of the two hosts. Kush is not going to be here today, so I'm going to be hosting an episode today alone. And welcome to the Singapore Injustice Podcast. Today I am going to talk about and discuss an article and a problem that I've been reading and I heard a lot about recently in Singapore, and that is how the foreign workers have been treated during the COVID pandemic. Earlier in the episode series, we had an episode, I think it was episode 2 or 3, about the Singapore foreign workers from Bangladesh and the Indian subcontinent that generally come to Singapore as construction workers to earn money for their families back home in Bangladesh and other countries. So we did an episode about them already, but that episode was discussed more the general state of things, whereas today I'm going to go a little bit more in depth in how they are treated during the COVID pandemic specifically. And I found this article here on Mothership called with the article title "Shameful State of Meals Given to Foreign Workers Reveal What This Country is Built On." And I think in this headline they emphasize the fact that they discuss what this country is built on, because in true essence, when before Singapore was what it is now, it was a poor fishing village that was insignificant compared to any other fishing village that you could find in Malaysia or Indonesia. And only when foreign workers, whether there are Westerners coming from Europe and the US with business interests and coming to Singapore, or whether it is low-income workers coming to Singapore for construction jobs, Singapore, and what this article really emphasizes here too is how important foreign workers are to what Singapore is today. Because if you look around, everything around us is built by these foreign workers that are, as discussed in this article, treated so terribly. Shameful state of meals given to foreign workers reveal what this country is built on. Built on rancid food and sad portions. That is. Written by Jonathan Lim, March 20th, so that's a little bit less than a month ago. A study by researchers from the National University of Singapore and HealthServe, a non-governmental organization, has revealed the sorry state of meals provided to foreign construction workers in the Tai Seng area, according to a March 19 Today news report. And I will put an image that I'm looking at right now of one of the meals in the description of this podcast. It was reported that packed breakfasts and lunches for these workers cooked at 3 a.m. each day, and it was reported that packed breakfasts and lunches cooked for these workers cooked at 3 a.m. each day, and delivered to the construction site at 6 a.m. That meant that lunch packs may turn out rancid by midday. Workers spoken to also complained that the food provided by caterers lacked protein, contained expired ingredients, and even spoiled food. The catered food cost about a quarter of a foreign worker's salary. If you think about this in a different economical sense, you have an already fairly underpaid worker that does a physical labor job, such as construction, to generalize, but such as construction, who needs the protein, needs the energy throughout the day, that these people, that the companies that employ them rely upon, are getting are getting this terrible food that they fuel for the day that they do, is really, really sad. And especially when thinking about it as the catered food costing a quarter of the foreign worker's salary, it puts a different lens on things, because then getting expired, inedible, or poor food, it doesn't just mean that you get poor food. That means that, in essence, when discussing the financial, when discussing it in an purely economical sense, it changes the state of things a lot, because you go from because the foreign workers, they earn relatively little compared to how much that food costs. That food is a big part of what they work for, making the fact, therefore, if the food decreases in quality or quantity, that indirectly or directly, depends on how you want to see it, change the amount of money that they earn. So, in a sense, when Jonathan Lim writes, workers spoken to also complained that the food provided by caterers lacked protein, contained expired ingredients, and spoiled food. The catered food cost about a quarter of a foreign worker's salary. Whether or not that is included, I'm unsure, but I will link resources in the comments of this, in the description of this YouTube video. It's just, if you think about it, really, then what happens to the foreign workers is it's a pay decrease. They get less value for what work they put in, which compared to how much money they do earn, is truly indespicable, because the companies that employ them are seeking any way to minimize the cost to maximize their profit and minimize the costs that the workers themselves take up out of their expenses. While caterers do provide employers the option of having a meal delivered separately, it would cost $50 more per worker, and employers do not take up the offer. Obviously, because $50 is a lot for a foreign worker, I'd say. And sadly, it's the case that foreign workers often cannot afford, even despite being paid the sufficient amount to be able to afford that $50 price tag. It's a known fact that generally foreign workers send most of the money home to ensure that their families stay alive and their families can live off that money. Although some workers are given the option to cook for themselves, the long queues for using cooking equipment, a wait of up to 90 minutes, mean that they would have to sacrifice sleep and rest time. Having meals outside would also eat into their already small salary meant for sending home to the families, like I just said. Here are a few questions to ask them. Why are the foreign workers not up in arms over this? If you understand how much money some of these foreign workers owed to agents who brought them to Singapore, you'll understand how many of these workers are suffering in silence. Generally because how the system works of agents bringing foreign workers to Singapore, and then agents ultimately having all the power given their bureaucratic and financial reach over these foreign workers. The foreign workers are generally pushed into silence and taken advantage of, and generally the money that they earn, or the money that they are supposed to pay back to these agents that that allegedly saved their lives and saved their families by bringing them to Singapore, could be used over their head, and they could be used for owing that money, which is exactly what happens here. So that's also why generally you don't hear as much about this as you do, or especially in the mainstream media, such as the Straits Times or Channel News Asia. It's because it's not very common for foreign workers to talk about this explicitly, because either they're sacrificing their safety, or they think they're sacrificing their safety, financial safety or physical safety. Currently, either way, the foreign workers, they suffer in silence, like Mr. Jonathan Lim here says. So if you think about it, the most efficient way to counteract this big problem of foreign workers being taken advantage of, which is in essence the umbrella problem of the whole issue, would be to change and switch up the whole system with regards to private agents. So think of such a non-private industry, because at the moment all these agents are are employed by private employers and companies that earn their money off of getting people from Bangladesh or India or the Indian subcontinent into Singapore to do their job. Now, if you were to take away that idea of profit and make it and ensure that a governmental organization on its own, with full power over the process from start to finish, owns and can choose what happens and how much money people have to pay to get to Singapore, that would drastically change the amount of power the foreign workers have here, which would cause a chain reaction of foreign workers having more of a say, being more open about the atrocities that are committed at them, and atrocities such as this would be more common. You would hear about this more often, and it would be a bigger problem in Singapore, because I know for a fact most people living in Singapore, and most Singaporeans themselves, either don't know what's going on, don't think that what's going on is actually true, or haven't heard about it enough to allow it relevance in their lives. Whereas if you take away the power by these privatized agents and their companies that are bringing the foreign workers to Singapore and using them and abusing them financially, and such as what's happening here, these foreign workers wouldn't be quiet, and it would fix a big problem. It would fix this big problem along with many other problems regarding foreign workers. If you'd like to know how some foreign workers who voice up for their own right are dealt with, you should read this post by Banglar Kanta, a Bengali news blog in Singapore. I will link that post in the comments too. Another question generally discussed when talking about this topic is: are profit margins for construction companies so thin that they cannot improve food quality? In the general case, without deepening yourself into it, you could think about, as long as there's profit made, there's no excuse not to treat your workers well. And that's not said in the sense of there should be no profit made. Obviously, businesses are meant to profit off of their actions in the economy, but there cannot be, like, if you scratch this question on the surface, there cannot be a valid reason for workers to be treated as badly as they do, for if the company still itself makes profit. So any alleged, because if you ask any business, I'm 100% sure that any alleged business would just waffle their way out of it and come up with a bunch of random excuses, or just straight up deny it. Both very, very viable. While not all companies are guilty for providing poorly catered food to its workers, it is quite telling how caterers have said that employers are not keen to spend $50 more per worker to improve the quality of food they receive. So, generally, also what's highlighted here, what Mr. Lim highlights here in this article here, is that $50 more per worker paying $50 more per worker is possible to include to increase the quality of food, but it's unrealistic, as we discussed earlier. But also how not all companies are guilty of this, obviously. Such a general sweeping statement is just, in almost all cases, completely invalid. Another question, the third question that's often discussed often mentioned when discussing this problem is that is it any wonder that Singaporeans shun jobs in the construction industry? Then I'd say, is it fair for employers in the construction industry to say that Singaporeans are picky? Singaporeans shun jobs in construction industry because the salary is meager, quality food is shameful, and work hours are long. while foreign workers can tough it out in these grueling conditions to send money home where the money can buy a better life, this salary does not buy a better life for Singaporeans, especially with a high cost of living here, which is very true. So here, it's highlighted like the fact that how Lee Kuan Yew, the first president of Singapore, Prime Minister of Singapore, highlighted the fact that foreign work, cheap labor, foreign work, and Western business interests are all crucial for the development of Singapore, and are all equally crucial. An example of Lee Kuan Yew, the man from which the whole ideology and whether economic or social Singapore is currently still based off, despite his passing years ago. What he said about the issue is, I remember watching an interview during the SARS pandemic in the early 2000s. I think it was the early 2000s, where Singapore was hit hard, just like other Asian countries and Asian territories such as Hong Kong and countries such as China, and especially the Middle East, I think, got hit very hard. Lee Kuan Yew was questioned after SARS. Lee Kuan Yew was on a panel and was questioned why, because due to SARS, many Singaporeans lost their jobs. And then a question from the audience was, why, given the fact that many Singaporeans lost their jobs, are foreign workers still in Singapore today? And then the audience member questioned Lee Kuan Yew's dedication to the lowest unemployment rate possible for Singaporeans and not for general people that work here. So Lee Kuan Yew answered this by saying that, I'm merely paraphrasing here, but Lee Kuan Yew answered this by saying that Singapore would not be where it is without foreign work, and no matter what happens, the Singaporean people will always be able to relapse. And that goes to show how important that is, and that's also what Mr. Lim highlights here in this part of the article, the fact that Singaporeans play a very significant role, Westerners play a very significant role, and so do foreign workers, such as domestic workers and construction workers, play a very role in Singaporean society. And all a relatively equal role, because without one, the Singaporean society would fall apart. The final question that is heavily related with this problem is the question of how can Singaporeans help to improve the situation. We can start by treating Singaporeans and Singaporean citizens, as people that live in Singapore, can start by treating foreign workers with more respect and dignity. At least one person on Facebook has pledged to do something about how foreign workers have been fed. And I'll link this post by Ching Liang in the description too. It's all about dignity and respect, and it's all about standing up for what you believe in too. So the simplest things, such as just treating foreign workers that, for example, fix the road that you live on, or are building a store that you're going to go to once it's open, like just treating them with respect and treating them as people instead of just things that do their job, because that in essence is the dignity that many, as what Mr. Lim here says, to many people, many foreign workers desire, because they're just overlooked in society. That is it from the article, and now I will talk about just a quick CAS opportunity to do with this. Firstly, a non-CAS opportunity, just look out and be more conscious of your actions when it comes to treating foreign workers and people that immigrated here to ensure that their family back home has a better life. Treating them with more respect and dignity. It's obviously a very, very clear, simple, and clear-cut, effective solution to this problem. But also, more of a CAS-related solution to this problem is something called the Giving Hearts Foundation. The Giving Hearts Foundation is a foundation that focuses on feeding and supplying household supplies to people that need it in Singapore, whether they are Singaporeans, foreigners, domestic workers, or anything. The Willing Hearts Foundation in close to the Chai Chi Community Hub is a place where it's a kitchen where many people go to volunteer and cook food for people that need it in Singapore, and lots of this food goes to foreign workers, but also lots of it goes to those people that are disabled and other less fortunate groups, such as a secular non-affiliated charity. Willing Hearts is wholly run by volunteers, apart from a handful of staff. It operates a soup kitchen that prepares and cooks and distributes about 10,000 daily meals to over 40 locations worldwide, 365 days a year. Beneficiaries include the elderly, disabled, low-income families, children of single-parent families, and otherwise poverty-stricken families, and migrant workers in Singapore. Willing Hearts is actually registered as a society in the with the Ministry of Home Affairs since February 2005, and as a charity of the Ministry of the Ministry of Social and Family Development since December 2008. In addition, Willing Hearts extends the following services to its beneficiaries: dental care, traditional Chinese health, medical treatments, optical care, and bereavement service. But that is pretty irrelevant. Their vision is to improve the lives of the underprivileged and marginalized by protecting them with their own daily bread and quote daily bread, and help them become more useful members of society. Their mission is to provide daily meals and other support services to the underprivileged, the needy, and other marginalized members in Singapore, to assist and guide them towards rehabilitating and reinstating themselves as a useful member of the society. So basically, the cash opportunity here that's prevalent in this situation would be to go to Willing Hearts, which is located in let me double check this, give me a second, is located in the east of Singapore, in Geylang, close to close to the Tai Seng MRT station, as well as the Paya Lebar or Dakota MRT stations. Just going to Willing Hearts and volunteering there, you could just show up and check in and then just help. There's always space for volunteers. And actually, as a matter of fact, a while back, I went to volunteer there a few times with a friend of mine too, and we started off chopping onions for the evening meal service. So this happened like early noon. But then we were asked to hop in a truck to help carry. To hop in a truck with the staff member to go around to different companies in Singapore and pick up supplies and distribute them. So, such as we went to Meiji and we picked up like tons and like multiple pellets of soy milk, and then we went to certain Buddhist and Sikh temples and places of worship, and distributed them there. And then we went all around Singapore, and we drove all the way to the east and then all the way to the north, and then we distributed it all over the place. And then by the time we came back to Willing Hearts, we had no supplies left, which is seen as a highly successful mission. I did that, and it was despite besides it being extremely useful and you contributing to society in such a way, it's also incredibly important to realize that it's also not that bad. It's also very fun. Especially if you do it with a friend, it's extremely enjoyable. You contribute to charity and you help out and you help these foreign workers with food troubles, but you also have lots of fun in the process. So there's really no reason not to do it, and it doesn't take that much time. If you want to be part of the morning breakfast service, then you'd have to go very, very early, around like 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning, which is when they start cooking. But generally, if you're not necessarily keen on being part of the breakfast service, which isn't part of the breakfast, like the breakfast service requires the most manpower because at least a lot of people are willing to get up that early, which is sad, really, which is understandable too, but still sad. If if instead you could just come in at any time during the day and just to help out, because they always need an extra pair of hands, whether it is, as I remember myself, carrying massive bags of sand from one place 10 meters away to another place 10 meters away. Anything helps, and it's really easy to get there, to go there and to just help out. So that's what you could do for the CAS funding, for your own CAS service to help out these foreign workers. The link to Willing Hearts will be put in the description of this podcast. That wraps it up. This podcast was just hosted by me, and I'm very thankful for having you guys for these 26 minutes almost. And that was the Singapore Injustice podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.